Hi, I'm Derek, and today I'll be doing a walkthrough of my ASCII art project. Um, in this project, I did and for this project, I wrote several different programs in four different languages: Java, Python, Swift, and C, where they all display the same ASCII image. It's an image of an eye. You'll see it when I run it the first time. Um, so I'm just gonna do a regular walkthrough of just the whole program. I'm just going to trace it. So starting at Java here, we have class main, and then this is only used for like a client method, and then there's another class ASCII thing. This is just to make it more object oriented. So it starts with the main method, so the client method. So it references render, and here you can see render is just a constant method. It's not object oriented. So in the render method here, it is void, so it doesn't return anything. It first instantiates a new ASCII thing called I, and it creates this new ASCII thing with the parameters I, the string I, and then well, let's go to the constructor method in the ASCII thing I first. So because it had a string input, it used the custom constructor here, ASCII thing string. There's a default constructor here, and it just displays a dot, or it returns a dot instead of the image of the eye. The idea is that you have many ASCII things in the ASCII thing class, so it's not just an eye. But and here I only really did one design, and that's the eye. So so here it says in name equals name2 lowercase. This is just to make it an objective string. So like capitalization doesn't matter, so you could have a capital E or a capital Y if you wanted to, and it'd still return I. So if the lowercase is equal to I, then it sets the parameters, the fields, I should say, for ASCII thing to equal the I design specific things. So num lines equals 12. That's because there are 12 lines in the design. And then the lines here, that is in reference to the I, or the lines field for the ASCII thing. That is just an array. That's an array list of all the lines together. That's how I felt like designing it. And then string type here, that's just to put the type of the ASCII thing into just a regular string, so it's easy to reference for other lines of code. I don't really use it in this program, but it's designed that if you did need to use it in other ways, you could. So to go back up to this line here, this dot lines equals get design I. So it's calling a method itself in the ASCII thing. In the ASCII thing class, this get design I method, and it basically says here's a new array list, and then in this array list add all these strings, and there are 12 strings as to mimic or match up with the number of lines. So it adds all this, and then it returns some lines, so it's returned back up here. So lines is equal to the array list defined here, and then so that's the construction, and then we go back up here, back up to this render here. So then it says I.render, so the object specific rendering. So you go down here, and it has this public method render here. So it's saying for each string in lines, it prints out the line and then basically clicks enter or presses enter, and then it does that for all the things, and then we'll run it here, and then it prints this out. Don't worry about this, it doesn't matter. Okay, so now over to the Python one. These are all pretty consistent with the fields. There's numLines field, there's type field, and then lines field. And this is just going to be an array of strings. It's not an array list. I prefer array lists when I'm programming just because it's mutable, but I don't really know how to do array lists or lists in Python, so I just went with array. Also, it's inconsistent here. Every other one, it's just type, but this one's my type because in Python, type, like just type is a keyword, so I had to put the prefix my there just to make it different. So yeah, so I define the class here first because there isn't like a main class in Python, really. There might be, but it's kind of irrelevant. So first thing it does is it defines the fields, and it's just it doesn't define them as anything per se to start. You're like, this isn't going to be used at any point because we'll instantiate it first, but this is just to like give the names for things that we'll be using later. This is the initialization of the class itself, so, and it has two parameters, self, because Python needs that, and then name, that's what's passed to define my type and define what type of ASCII thing it's going to be there. So then it says, so then this if statement here is to deliberate if it's going to be I or something else, but usually it's not going to be something else because I didn't design anything else. So if it is I, then it's going to return the I design, and if it's not I, then it's just going to be the dot. So this is the same thing with get design I, so it goes down here, and then, but this just has this just sets the lines field equal to this array. Like, it doesn't return anything. It just, this is just like a object changing method. So once it's done initializing, then it renders, well down here you have the client, I guess you could say. So it constructs it, and then it does render. So then when it does render, it just calls this method, and then this is a for loop, basic for loop for the lines array. So it's for each line in lines, print the line. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And then we'll go over to Swift here. Oh wait, I should test this. Okay, so run, and yeah, it works fine. So we'll go over to Swift now. So class, ASCII thing, then all these fields, and then Swift was kind of different than all the other ones. I found it the most annoying personally. So then here are the fields, and then here's the initializer or the constructor, whatever you want to call it. This has in it like Python. So it starts off with, alright, well, let's go down to the client here. So let I equal ASCII thing name I. So this is just parameters name is equal to I. Oops. And it's just creating an object I, and then has I.render like the other ones. So let's go up to the constructor here. So if name, that's this right here. If the parameter called name is passed as I, then construct it as an I, and then otherwise just do a dot like the other ones, and then get design I. So this is just like the Python one where it just sets it equal to an array. Actually no, it creates an array called sumLines as just this, so it just creates an array, then returns the array. So then up here it's set as lines equal get design I, so there's that. And then so it constructs it, and then you go down to the render here. So then here's the render. I'm not personally a huge fan of this arrow here. I think it's kind of silly, but Swift designers, I'm guessing they know what they're doing, so they can do what they want. But this is just saying it's returning nothing. But if I return something, then it'd be return whatever I'd be returning down here. But that's besides the point. So here we have var temp num equals num lines, and then it's a basic while loop. I probably shouldn't have used a while loop. They're usually dangerous, but I figured it's fine in this case because you have this variable, which is decides if it keeps going, and then so you have while temp num is more than 0, temp num minus equals 1, so it goes down each time you go through this part. So it prints lines, num lines minus temp num, so it so temp num will be equal to the number of lines to start. So num lines minus temp num is 0, so it prints the lines index 0, so that's the first line in lines. And then the second one would be temp num equals, well, no, it's so temp num minus equals 1, so then temp num is equal to 1 less than the number of lines, so number of lines minus temp num is 1, so it's the index 0.1 in the array lines, so the second line. And then it just goes through that until it's gotten to the last one, and then it just exits out of the while loop. And then yeah, that's it. So we'll run it here, and yeah, it works. Okay, so now this is the C one. C is not, it doesn't have objects the same way ASCII like the Swift or Python or Java does, because it's older. So I had to define render I first. So that's just, it just goes through the different parts of the I line by line. It's kind of primitive doing this, but C is a primitive language in general. So and then we have render dot here. That's just the dot. So int main void. So here's the main method. So int numlines char type 1000. This is because it's basically creating an array type with 1000 spots. This is to basically be a string, but you can't really do strings the same way in C. So this is just a way of doing it. So, oh yeah, and in C, just to like spruce it up a bit to make it a bit more interesting, since there's not arrays or anything, or I didn't use arrays or anything like that. I just wanted to throw something in there, so I said, well, let's have an input. So it prints enter the word I, and these slashes are here because you can't just have the end quotes, or else it would break the programming here on this line. So the slash before the quote is to actually print out a quote on the actual thing. But yeah, so it prints this out, and then f gets type 20 stdin. This is just one of the things C does. C's kind of annoying. This is basically, it just gets a value that you type in, and then it saves it to type right here. So it's the input string basically, and it saves it to type. That's all you need to know. So diff equals to strncmp type I 0. So this basically compares type, the string type and I, and then car str s print f. I'll be honest, I don't entirely know how this code works here, but it basically okay, so this part right here was just for debugging purposes. I looked at it and I was like, why is this here? Then it's not necessary for the actual program, so I just commented it out here. So diff equals this. So if difference is equal to 0, then render I. So if it is the same, if the two strings type and I are the same, then render I. Else, just render the dot. So basic, the default print statement so just a dot, and then return 0 because int main void. You have to return an integer here because of int. So I'm going to run it again. I'd already run it there, but don't worry about that. So enter the word I, enter, and then it prints out an I. And yeah, there you go. That's the project. Thank you for watching.